Hey everyone, it's Nighthawk. I've been playing a lot of the new Swarm League of Legends game mode on PBE, and I've been playing a lot of solo extreme difficulty. So I decided to make a quick tier list on the champions that I think are your best shot for playing solo extreme. At the moment, I'm playing on the PBE servers, so some of this is probably going to change before it comes to live. But I think if anything is majorly different, I can make a pinned comment or I can do an updated video. So let's just take a look at the champions we think are not even worth playing at all in solo extreme, maybe even extreme in general. These may be better when you're playing with teammates, but I've mostly been playing alone or with one other person. So we'll see if that makes that much of a difference. There is some enemy scaling depending on how many people you're playing with. And that could make certain champions better or worse. But this is just my gut feeling. I've played probably over 100 games of Swarm so far. We've maxed out every single character. We've gotten to the highest level of anima power. So we're pretty far along, and I think I've formed a good enough opinion on these. So we'll start out with Jinx, because she's the first character that you get. You start out with her. Honestly, I think Jinx is in the don't even bother tier. In her current state, it feels like she isn't even a jack of all trades. She sort of feels like the beginner tutorial character, but not even strong. Her whole thing is that she gets a lot of projectile weapons. You run around really quickly and you do a lot of damage. Unfortunately, with her and with a lot of the other champions on this list, it kind of feels like the damage that you do isn't outweighed by how vulnerable you are to a lot of the different AoE attacks that are in later extreme modes. I guess I should start out by saying that the main difficulty with extreme mode is not the enemies themselves. Most of the enemies you can kill pretty easily. It's the damage that you take. Pretty much every projectile and some of the later bosses will kill you in 1 to 2 hits in extreme mode. So you have to take that into account. Something that is really frustrating with Jinx in her current state is that the amount of move speed that you get from your passive actually scales heavily with the amount of move speed you already currently have. It's like exponential stacking. So you can get to the point where your move speed is far too much to even play the game effectively. I might insert a clip into here to show you exactly what happens when you get too much on move speed. Something that happened to my stream a couple days ago. It's going to kill me. It's actually going to kill me one of these days. I think I just have to stand still. Look how fast I am. Holy shit. Gee. I fucking told you. I fucking told you that was going to happen. Basically, you just run into enemies way too quickly before you can even kill them because you can't really control where you're going. So unfortunately, I think Jinx is in the don't even bother tier for solo extreme. She can be fun. She has a lot of cool combinations that you can do, but I don't think sheer damage is high enough to even bother working with. Next up, we have Seraphine. I think I would put Seraphine in the okay if you're lucky tier. I've actually had a pretty good amount of solo wins with Seraphine. She feels pretty consistent. But unfortunately, your single target damage can be fairly low if you don't get the correct augments or the correct weapons. When you're in the extreme mode, you can sort of guarantee your build most games, but there's definitely high rolls and low rolls that you can get, and it makes it very difficult to consistently get a build where you're like, okay, I can beat every single boss on extreme mode. Something that is really difficult with extreme is that if you die, you're out. There's no second chances. When you're playing with friends, they can revive you. So if you die, it's not the end of the game. In extreme, you're dead. The whole run's over. You have to restart from the beginning. And Seraphine, I think, struggles really hard in the mid game, the early to mid game. She just doesn't have enough damage to kill the elites and bosses very quickly. If you can get your build maxed out, you can pretty much get to the point where you probably can kill the bosses, but then you're kind of in the same situation as Jinx, where you don't really do enough damage to warrant playing such a squishy character. I will say that if you have enough ability haste, your shield can go to, I think it's like a 5 to 6 second cooldown. It's pretty short. So you can pretty much keep your shield up constantly, which gives you a lot more survivability than somebody like Jinx, who has no defensive abilities. But I still don't think it makes her like anything more than high B tier, if we're calling this B tier. I guess we'll be arranging each champion based on their strengths within that individual tier. So we'll basically just leave her here for now. We may change her later on down the line. Leona. We'll start with Leona because I feel like Leona is the third champion that most people are going to play. I think you unlock her pretty early on. I think Leona is actually fairly easy to solo, extreme solo with. The biggest strength of Leona is that she is very hard to kill. She's a tank. And you have a lot of AoE damage. Two things that are really, really important when you're playing solo and you're playing on extreme difficulty. She kind of has the same style of E as Seraphine, where it gives you a big shield, but her E actually gives her a large amount of armor as well. And armor makes it so that you basically take no damage. And it actually also scales the rest of your abilities with armor. So Leona has a lot of strengths for extreme solo. The biggest weakness she has is, again, kind of like Seraphine. She struggles to kill bosses, especially if you don't have certain weapons that work on killing bosses very quickly. The main build that I usually go with Leona doesn't have a ton of single target damage. So if you are playing Leona and you're doing extreme solo, I would recommend trying to spec into 1 or 2 weapons that have more single target damage or more bursting damage, just so you can kill those bosses. But Leona is pretty much a free 15-minute win every single time. Like, you'll get to 15 minutes almost every single time on Leona, unless your build is really bad. The thing is, you may not always kill the boss. You may not have enough damage to kill, especially Aatrox. Aatrox is very difficult to get through with Leona because you just don't quite have enough damage to kill her. But I would pick Leona if I was starting out and I was trying to solo extreme. This would be the first character that I would try. Just because I think she does scale really easily and her builds are very consistent. Next up, we have Alawi. And Alawi is probably my favorite champion in the game. I'm going to put her at the top of your best chance, the S tier. Alawi excels at almost everything, in my opinion. Her builds are very easy to get. There's really only 2 or 3 passives that you really need to get every single game. I think if you are early on, you probably want to get ability haste. You need duration and XP, but XP is something that I think you want to get every game anyway. So Alawi is super easy to get. You don't really need any specific passives on her other than duration and maybe ability haste. You don't really need anything specific in her weapons. I think you can pretty much go any weapons and she's fine. She's very powerful on her own. And the thing that she has going for her is that, 1, she's fairly tanky. She is, I believe, the highest base HP in the game, at least from what I've seen so far. 2, she has built-in health regen based on how many tentacles are near you. If you haven't played Alawi, her ability is spawn a tentacle, and then the tentacles will last a certain amount of time and slam on the ground based on your ability haste. And every single tentacle that spawns near you improves your health regen by 1. And that doesn't sound like a ton until you have 30 or 40 or 50 or 80 tentacles out on the field, and you're healing for 100 health a second, which is very, very, very powerful when you're playing solo extreme, because one of the main problems you have is taking a bad hit from like a bomb or one of the frog damaging fields and not being able to heal back up before you can take another hit. You basically have 2 to 3 hits when you're playing a champion on extreme before you die if you don't heal back up to full. So if you don't have a good way to heal, then you're going to die very quickly if you make mistakes. So that's why I kind of like Alawi. She's fairly tanky. She has excellent regen. Her damage is actually very good off the tentacles. You will have hundreds of tentacles out on the field, and they all do fairly good damage. They scale with most of your passives. So honestly, really strong option. Her ultimate is very good at killing elites early. There's very few things that I think she's weak at. She's a little weak early if you don't get a good start, but honestly, she's nowhere near as weak as some of these other champions early. So I think that they're in her current state. There are very few downsides to playing Alawi. She can struggle to kill some of the bosses that move around a lot. Aatrox does move around a lot in his final fight, so there can be some problems getting enough tentacles to stay on him. But if you manage your ult correctly, I don't think that's going to be much of a difficulty. Like there shouldn't be too many ways that you won't win those fights. As always, Extreme is kind of just based on how well you can dodge the skill shots, and things can get very difficult to see. So I won't say that you have a 100% win rate on Alawi. There's no chance you'll lose, but that's why I have this tier as your best chance, because I think Alawi is probably your best chance to beat Extreme solo with. I've gushed enough about Alawi. Let's move on to Yasuo. I like Yasuo. I think he's better than Seraphine. I think his early game is very weak, and I think it's very difficult to get chugging. He kind of struggles with the same way as a lot of the other melee champions do, where your early game survivability is not very good. You do have an invulnerability dash, which is on a pretty short cooldown, so that can help quite a bit. But he kind of struggles to get going. But once you do get going, he is one of the highest damage champions you can get. He scales very high off of crit chance and projectiles. So those are two really easy stats to get. You get a lot of them free from the anima power and the passives. So once you get going, you get a really good build going. Very, very strong. He is fairly squishy, but with his dashes and in his ultimate, it is a little easier to dodge some of the late game projectiles. I usually don't like playing Yasuo because I feel like, one, it's very visually cluttering. His builds get very, very visually busy. There's just a lot of stuff going on the screen, which can make it very difficult to see the projectiles, which means that more likely than not, you'll be saying, oh, what the hell, dying to something you couldn't even see, especially in a fight like Aatrox. So that is one of the reasons why I have him down here in B tier, not in your best chance, because I think that because he's so squishy and he's a melee champion for a large portion of the game, not a large portion of the game, he's short range until you get your build going. I think he struggles a lot with the later tiers of difficulty. We'll go with Briar next, because I think she gets unlocked fairly early as well. I don't really like Briar in her current state. I think she might be better than Yasuo. Her ultimate is very powerful, but she struggles with a lot of the same things. She's melee tier. I think I'll put her in the middle of B tier. I've probably played Briar the least. Well, not quite the least, but I've played the Briar the least out of the champions that are up here already. Her main gimmick is that you kind of go face tank mode and you just heal a lot, which works really, really well in the lower difficulties. But when you're playing on extreme solo and one wrong move will kill you, it doesn't really work that well. There are two enemies in the game at the moment that are Briar's nemesis. There's the frog, which drops a pool of damaging like goop on the floor when it dies, and there's the bomb, which blows up for a lot of damage when they die. Both of those things will kill you in 2 to 3 hits on any character, except for maybe Leona and Alawi. But Briar and any of these other characters will die very quickly to the bombs or the goop. And when you're playing a character that can't control their movement when they're using their ability, that's very, very dangerous. Another thing that Briar doesn't really have going for her is that most of the things that you want to build on Briar are pretty short range. There are some things that you can go that are higher range, but when you have only short range weapons, it means that a lot of the damage to things like the bombs or the bigger elites can get on top of you and hurt you before you can hurt them. One of the other problems I have with Briar is that when you're in your gremlin mode, when you're attacking enemies, the enemies still damage you. You get 25% damage reduction, but when you're attacking a boss or an elite, they will kill you very quickly, even with your damage reduction. So I just don't really like her. When she ults, I will say her ultimate is probably one of the best boss killing things in the entire game. It basically goes into like a super form of her E ability. It gives you way more damage, way more attack speed, way more damage reduction. way more healing. It melts. It absolutely melts. But it's one of the longest ultimate cooldowns in the game, even with a lot of ability haste. And it doesn't really offset the rest of her weaknesses. So I like Briar when I'm playing with friends. She does a ton of damage to bosses. She can melt pretty much any enemy in the game. But I think she's just a little too vulnerable to be playing solo extreme on. I wouldn't say don't play her. I would just say be ready to lose a lot of maps in a pretty frustrating way if you do want to play her. Okay. This one might be a little contentious because if you've been playing on PBE, Riven has gone through a series of balance changes recently, and I don't know what she's going to be like on release. I hope that they buff her back up, but honestly, at the moment, I think Riven might just be the worst possible champion to play extreme solo on. She's bad at everything at the moment. She used to have a very, very powerful sustaining passive where it would give her a large shield based on how much damage she does. They kind of nerfed that to the ground, and then they also nerfed the passive anima power scalings for her. So she has one of the weakest early games, maybe even weaker than Jinx because she's melee and you have to get in range of targets to do damage. And also, she doesn't do that much damage. Like I out damage Riven on most of these other champions except for maybe Leona. Even like Jinx and Seraphine, which aren't really high damage champions, I'll do more damage than Riven most of those times. Riven does have some pretty insane capped out builds where she can do a ton of damage really, really quickly in certain situations. But I think she's so build dependent and so weak in her current state after the nerfs that I just don't like playing her. You may see some people who really recommend Riven because one, she's a lot of fun. And two, she does have, I think, a higher skill cap than most of these other champions, which is not something that is super important in Swarm, but it can be pretty important. So if you like Riven, by all means, play her. I don't like her at all for solo extreme. I think she's way too vulnerable. She doesn't do enough damage. She's not tanky enough. There's just no real reason that I would pick her over the fact that, hey, I haven't played Riven in a while. I want to have some fun. Getting down to Aurora. I have not played a ton of Aurora. I don't really like her. She can do a lot of damage. I've seen some people do quite a bit of damage on her. But I think I would probably put Aurora above Jinx in the don't even bother tier. I think the main problem with Aurora is sort of the same that plagues every other ranged damaged character in the game, is she's very vulnerable to projectiles. She's very squishy, and she actually kind of takes a lot of brain power to play. And it may sound weird to say that about a game like Swarm, which is a Vampire Survivors clone. But Aurora probably has the highest amount of I need to actually pay attention to what I'm doing out of all of these characters, because her main spell follows your mouse cursor. So it's sort of like a little Yumi passive. And to get the most out of her, you basically have to drag your mouse cursor over every single enemy, and it kind of just takes up a lot of your brain power. And when you're dragging your mouse cursor and you're paying attention to where your mouse cursor is, you may not be paying attention to where your character is. And that means that you may die a lot to really annoying stuff like bombs or frogs or elites that you weren't paying attention to. I will say that her E is very strong. It makes you invulnerable for like 5 or 6 seconds, and it gives you a lot of damage. So she has some get out of jail free cards, which are really powerful. But I think the nail in the coffin for Aurora is that in its current state, her ultimate feels less than worthless. It kind of feels like it's actively bad to use. I actually just played a game where I was playing with someone. We were on the final boss, and they cast the Aurora ultimate, and it bugged out to where they couldn't cancel it. And they got stuck in a damaging field of gas, and they died, and we lost the round because they couldn't cancel the ultimate, and they were stuck in the ult because it just kept bouncing them back into the gas. So I'm personally not a fan of Aurora. She does do a lot of damage. She has some really cool kits that she can do. She's more unique than most of these other characters. But I think stick with playing with friends with her, because you will die a lot to stupid stuff. Last but not least, I think this is a character I've probably played the least out of all of these, except for maybe Aurora. So I don't want to rank her too low just in case I'm not playing her properly. I'm going to put her at the top of B tier. So Xayah has, in my opinion, the best single target damage in the entire game, or like focused damage, I should say. You can kill, with enough setup, you can kill any elite and most bosses in the game in under like 3 to 4 seconds. She absolutely melts everything. She is still vulnerable to a lot of the same problems that a champion like Seraphine, Jinx, or Aurora have, where you're squishy. She doesn't have any survivability in her kit. Her ultimate does make her go untargetable for like half a second, but it's a long cooldown and it's not that useful. You mostly just use it to like maybe dodge one big hit and then do a lot of damage. But she's pretty vulnerable to a lot of the same problems that every other champion is vulnerable to. You take a wrong hit and you're already down to 1 HP and you're pretty much going to die. The reason why I think she's at the top of B tier and the okay if you're lucky tier is her damage is just so insane in its current state that if you play well and you position correctly and you get a really good build, you can kill bosses before they can even set up. I think she can kill pretty much every single boss except for maybe Aatrox before they can even have a chance to kill you. So Xayah's a lot of fun. She struggles sometimes, but I think she is probably the best of the
what do you think
not S tier champions. Oh, hey. Sorry, I forgot to turn those off. Thanks for the follow. Waste of time to watch. If you liked this tier list, if this was something interesting to you, I may make more Swarm content. I've been playing it a lot on PBE. I'll probably be playing it a lot when it comes to live because it's a lot of fun. We may do guides for specific champions. We may do like, hey, here's my best passives that I want to try. But I don't really know. I don't know if anyone's interested in this kind of thing. We've been streaming it a lot on my Twitch, but it's just something that I'm personally enjoying doing. So I thought I'd make a quick guide on what I think the best champions are. As always with a game like this, one, there are going to be patches. So this tier list could change entirely before the game even comes out. Two, this is a for fun game mode, even more than, I think this is probably the most for fun game mode that you can have in League of Legends. So if I ranked your favorite character low, who cares? Play whatever you want, play whatever you have fun with. This is a very specific situation tier list. I think that if you aren't playing Extreme Swarm solo, this tier list probably doesn't matter that much. But I wanted to make sure that people had some sort of point of reference going into the game if they wanted to try playing at a higher competitive level. So if you like this, maybe check out the stream, check out the YouTube channel. We'll probably be doing some more Swarm gameplay when things come up. And hopefully Riot actually keeps this game mode around. This is probably the most fun Riot game mode we've had in a long time. I hope Riot has a lot of positive feedback for this mode so we can actually either get a rehash, maybe some added characters or added maps or something, or maybe some sort of like standalone client mod for it. I think that would be a lot of fun. So if you like Swarm, play it a lot, let Riot know. Hopefully you see the game mode become permanent. I'm enjoying it a lot. Thanks for watching.